Good afternoon, dear Dhamma listeners, and very warm and happy, prosperous, and safe 2020 to all of you. We are ready to start our sixth Abhidhamma class in English with our esteemed teacher, Buluwala Ratanasiri Tero. So it's right 2 p.m. Sri Lankan and Indian time now. So I hand over to Reverend Sir to start our sixth Abhidhamma lesson. Reverend Sir, you can unmute your microphone and also your video. Start your video.
Good afternoon. Let's start our Abhidhamma lesson. We were discussing about the aggregate consciousness. We discussed about sense sphere consciousness and fine material consciousness and immaterial consciousness. Today we are going to discuss supra-mundane consciousness. Before that, we have to recall our mind about the consciousness that we discussed in our last lessons. Since sphere consciousness, they are 54 in number, and fine material Rupavachara, they are 15 in number, and immaterial Arupavachara, they are 12 in number. These 81 consciousness associates in the universe, in the human world, in heavens, and in Brahmaloka, and hills, and so on. They associate in the universe. These consciousness, they associate and they functions in each kind of being in the circle of birth. So these consciousness, they remains in the circle of birth. These consciousness makes Tuti and Patisandhi in the circle of birth. You studied how our consciousness functions as Tuti Chitta and Patisandhi Chitta. So these consciousness always they make Tuti and Patisandhi. That means they continue the circle of birth. This consciousness help to the being to be in the circle of birth. Buddha teaches his Dhamma to transcend this world. Buddha explained the way how to transcend this circle of birth. In supramundane consciousness, Buddha has explained how to transcend this world. When person is transcending this world or his 5 aggregates, there arise these supramundane consciousness. They are called lokottara. To overcome or to transcend this universe or the world, the person must practice Tisiksa, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila, it is and developing your morality. When you consider this consciousness, sense sphere consciousness, 54, and fine material consciousness, 15, and immaterial consciousness, 12. Now they deal with seal, morality. You studied, there are unwholesome consciousness. There are 12 unwholesome consciousness. When person engage in unwholesome activity, there arise those 12 unwholesome consciousness. And when person engage in meritorious deeds, there arises this beautiful consciousness. In that way, you studied karma. When person engage in karma, there arise those consciousness. The Buddha said, Ketanaham bhikkhave kammam vadami. So this consciousness engage in volitional actions or in unwholesome activity or wholesome activity. So then, as a result of this karma, there arise those consciousness again. Now you studied kusala vipaka kriya in consciousness. You studied when you studied in fine material consciousness, they are divided into 3 categories: kusala, vipaka, kriya, wholesome, resultant, and functional. So, wholesome kusala and resultant is vipaka. So karma and vipaka, karma and result. There arise those consciousness, the same consciousness. When you engage in meritorious deeds like donation or observing seal precepts, there arise beautiful consciousness, wholesome, beautiful consciousness. Then as a result, there arise the same consciousness as a result. So karma and vipaka. So when person studies in deep those consciousness, they can understand the doctrine of karma, karma and vipaka. When person engaged in unwholesome activity, the result arise is painful. When person engaged in wholesome activities, result is pleasant. In that way, the being understand, he believe in karma and vipaka. As a result of that, he try to abstain from engaging in tenfold of unwholesome activities. And he try to engage in tenfold of wholesome activity. Dasa punyakya. So it is then this studying of this consciousness, the person tend to understand the validity of developing morality, seal. Then you studied how to develop your concentrations. When you studied about fine material consciousness, when you studied fine material consciousness, you studied how to develop your concentrations. If you want to be born in immaterial or the fine material world, Brahmaloka, or immaterial Brahmaloka, you have to develop those absorptions. You have to develop those jhana. In that way, you studied how to develop your concentrations. And you studied there the karma and vipaka. Karma and vipaka. When you developed fine material consciousness in your mind, then you develop the five jhanas, five absorptions. That is karma. As a result of that karma, you are to be born in Brahmaloka as a result. So there you again studied karma, and you studied the concentration, samadhi, how to develop your samadhi, concentration. So it is called developing the samatha bhavana. Samatha bhavana. So sila and samadhi. After developing samadhi, the meditator is ready to developed his vipassana bhavana, insight meditations, vipassana bhavana. When he wants to develop or engage in vipassana bhavana, vipassana meditation or insight meditation, he look into the phenomena in the light of Tilakkhana. In the light of Tilakkhana, he looks into the phenomena. He examines the nature of phenomena, impermanence. Now he takes each phenomena and he understands the impermanence of it. For instance, he thinks of his own body. He thinks of his own body and he understands the decay there. His old age. He does not like it, but it is ever going. It is ever going changing, getting old. In that way, the meditator, he understands impermanence in the phenomena. Then, as a result of impermanence, there arise unsatisfactory suffering. There arise when you get illness, when you are sick, then you feel suffering because of changing. Because of changing, there arise unsatisfactory. And the non-soul, the nature of non-soul in phenomena. You try to understand whether there is a soul in our body. To understand it, you divide your 5 aggregates, your own 5 aggregates in your mind. You divide when you engage in meditations. You divide your body or your 5 aggregates, and you understand there is no any permanent things, Atman or soul. So you understand non-soul nature in your body. In that way, when the meditator wants to practice vipassana bhavana meditation, he try to understand the Tilakkhana, anitya, dukkha, anatma, anitya, impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactory, anatma, non-soul. In that way, he try to understand the nature of the phenomena by engaging in insight meditation. When the person want to transcend this world or the 5 aggregates, he has to develop these insight meditation or vipassana bhavana. Buddha has divided all phenomena in this universe into two categories. It is called Sankata and Asankata. Sankata means they are the phenomena, they have been arise due to some cause, some reason. As a result of reason, these phenomena have been arise in the world. This Sankata Dhatu is called. So the human worlds and heavens and Brahmaloka, animal worlds, hells and universe, Takkaval. So all comes under Sankata Dhatu. So these consciousness, fine material consciousness, sense sphere consciousness, and immaterial consciousness. Those consciousness belongs to that Sankata Dhatu because they associate those within those Sankata Dhatu. Sankata Dhatu. Then another one is the Asankata Dhatu. Asankata Dhatu is not a phenomena. Asankata Dhatu is Nibbana. So this supramundane consciousness, this supramundane eight consciousness, they come under Asankata Dhatu. No world there. These consciousness, these eight consciousness, they do not associate in the world. It arises when meditator who try to develop, try to attain Nibbana, is Sovan, Sakurdagami, Anagami, Arihat. So the meditator, after developing his absorptions, jhanas, or concentration, when he wants to enter into that Nibbana way, he tries to develop this magga. He stopped developing jhana, and then he begins to develop magga. That is the pathway. What is magga? Magga is known as eightfold pathway. That is the magga. So he developed magga, eightfold pathway. There includes T6, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. There now, when we consider about eightfold pathway, there are the mental factors that arise in the mind who practice this magga. After developing, after having concentrations, he developed this magga, then he arises. He arises these mental factors, 8 mental factors. It is called eightfold pathway, the Magga Satya. So he developed, he practiced those eightfold pathway. When practicing these eightfold pathway, he gradually enter into Sovan state, then Sakadagam state, then Anagam state, and Arahant state. When he enter in those stages, there arises in his mind those supramundane 8 consciousness. When the person enters the Sotapanna state, it is called the enter into the stream. It is called the enter into the stream. He has entered the stream towards Nibbana. When he stopped with that, if person stop practicing his magga with that, with Sovan state, he will be born in circle of birth for 7 times. For 7 times, he has to be born in this world in circle of birth, samsara. And then Sakurdagami, the second state, once returning, Sakadagami, when he enters that state, the second state, if he stop with that, some persons were there, they died after attaining Sovan. Sometime they after attaining Sakurdagami, they dies. After attaining Anagami, they dies. In that way, when person stopped in the second stage, once returning, he returns to the circle of birth. He mixes with the circle of birth for 1 time. Anagami is called non-returning. When person dies in the state of Anagami, he never enters into this circle of birth again. He is to be born in Suddhavasa, and there he attains Nibbana. It's called non-returning. Returning means returning, coming back to this circle of birth, samsara. That is the nature of Sovan, Sakurdagami, Anagami, Arihant. When person comes to those stages, there arises those 8 supramundane consciousness. That's why those supramundane consciousness are known as Lokottara, the supramundane. It transcends the world, Lokottara. Then these consciousness, these eight supramundane consciousness are known as Niyanika. Niyanika means again the transcends the world. These consciousness transcends the world. So it is called Niyanika. Then these consciousness are known as Apachayagami. Apachayagami means these consciousness destroy Tuti and Patisan. These supramundane consciousness destroy Tuti and Patisandi. Tuti means death of the person. Patisandi means rebirth. So death and rebirth destroy this consciousness, this supramundane consciousness. They destroy this death and rebirth. So it is called Apachayagami. Apachayagami. And Dittagata Pahanaya. Dittagatam Pahanaya. So these supramundane consciousness, if this supramundane consciousness arises in the being or person, this supramundane consciousness destroy the 62 wrong views, Mityaditya, 62 wrong views. And these consciousness to arise those consciousness, the person, the being has to perform perfections. Sometimes so many births, within so many births in the circle of birth, he has to perform perfections. Now, so these consciousnesses are known as Dukkha Patipada Dantavinya. Dukkha Patipada Dantavinya. So you have to practice perfections a long time to arise, to create or arise this supramundane consciousness. Now think of our Buddha as a Bodhisattva. He performed 10 perfections. In Jataka stories, there are nearly 550 Jataka stories that reveals how the Buddha as the Bodhisattva, he performed these perfections, Dasaparamita. In that way, to create, to have, or to be arise those supramundane consciousness, the person has to perform the perfections long time. After performing long time in the circle of birth, then he is ready to arise those supramundane consciousness. You know, some disciples of the Buddha, like Arahant Sariputta, just after hearing the two lines of this stanza, they attained Nibbana because they have developed their mind in the circle of birth for so many, within so many births to enter that state. In that way, or some in Anterigata and Apadana Pali, we find some characters, some disciples. By looking at the lamp, flame of the lamp, and by looking at, and they developed their concentrations, and at once they arises there this supramundane consciousness, and they attain Nibbana. That is, they had performed those perfections for so many births in the circle of birth. Some disciples, they attained Nibbana by looking at the water, or how water falls on the ground and disappears. So looking at those water, the functions of water, taken as a cousin, and he developed his concentrations, and he aroused his supramundane consciousness, and he attains Nibbana. That happens due to the practice of long times in the circle of birth. So the supramundane consciousness, that kind of consciousness, the nature of the supramundane consciousness. Now we'll try to understand this supramundane consciousness. I told you there are 8 supramundane consciousness. Sotapatti, Magga Chitta, Sakadagami, Magga Chitta, Anagami Magga Chitta, Arahanta Magga Chitta. Then there is wholesome and resultant. Wholesome, 4 wholesome and 4 resultant. If we say this resultant, this resultant consciousness, they do not work like that former resultant consciousness, like fine sphere consciousness, fine material sphere consciousness, and immaterial consciousness resultant. They take some time to have result. Now, when you develop fine material consciousness as karma, then it takes long time to have the result. One day you dies. some maybe after 10 years or 20 years or so, with that fine material consciousness as wholesome, you dies, and as a result, you is to be born in that Brahma Loka. But here this supramundane consciousness resultant, they do not take time to give result. Just one. After arising the Magga Chitta, at that moment, the Phala Chitta, Vipaka Chitta arise. So they are known as Phala. Sotapatti Magga Chitta, Sotapatti Phala. The result comes very soon, at that moment. When the Magga Chitta arises, and at the same time, the Phala Chitta also arises. So they are called Phala. So Sotapatti Magga Chitta, the stream empty path consciousness. So on. Now he enters to the stream there. Then when he arrives this Magga Chitta, Sotapatti Magga Chitta, at that moment, there arises that Sotapatti Phala Chitta, stream empty fruit consciousness. Now, when meditator meditate absorptions, when he develops absorption jhana, see fine material consciousness, you know what are the fine material consciousness, wholesome consciousness, and resultant and functionals. Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekaggata. Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekaggata. Patamadhyana, chitta. So the first absorptions. Now when the meditator has developed those concentration absorptions, after developing these absorptions, he starts to develop this Magga, eightfold pathway towards Nibbana. Then, when he practices those eightfold pathway and he practiced 7 enlightenment factors, Sapta Buddhanga Dhamma, he developed. When he developed those Sapta Buddhanga Dhamma and eightfold pathway, there arise those Sotapatti Magga Chitta. Then, when person developed fine material consciousness, after developing those fine material consciousness, he stopped developing that consciousness because he has already entered those concentration, absorptions. He stopped and he practiced to Magga to enter Nibbana. He practiced, in other words, he practiced Vipassana Bhavana, insight meditation. He practiced. Then he arise this vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekaggata, patamajjhana, sotapatti, magga citta. Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekaggata, ekaggata, patamajjhana, sotapatti, magga citta. Right? And Phalacit also says, Vitakka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekaggata, Sotapatti, Phala, Chitta. Then, second one, second jhana. So, second consciousness, supramundane consciousness, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekaggata, Sahitam, Dutiya jhana, Sotapatti, Magga Chitta. And Piti Sukha Ekaggata Sotapatti Tatiya Dhyana Sotapatti Magga Chitta. Sukha Ekaggata Sahitam Tatutya Dhyana Sotapatti Magga Chitta. Then fifth one Upekkhā Ekaggata Sahitam Panchamadhyana Sotapatti Magga Chitta. So there are 10 we can, there are, it becomes ultimately is phala and there, then 20 into 1 becomes 40, or 8 into 5 becomes 40. You can understand how these supra-mundane eight consciousness becomes 40. That's how the total consciousness becomes 121. Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekaggata. Now, when person developed this magga, he, after enter into those jhana, panchamajjhana, then he, with this, on this jhana, he practiced the magga, that is eightfold pathway. You know, samma ditti, samma sankappa, samma vaca, samma kammanta, samma ajiva, samma vayama, samma sati, samma samadhi. Those are the eightfold pathway. In this eightfold pathway, there are contained the Tisikha, you know, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. So when person practice those, with those eightfold path, he practice in deep sense those Sila, Samadhi, Panya again. Because if you develop your jhana, by developing jhana, panchamadhyana or concentrations, you suppress 5 hindrance, you suppress defilements, but after your absorptions, there may be arise again. They will arise again. So you have to abolish those five hindrances, and you have to abolish all defilements. By practicing this magga, the Sila Samadhi Panya, this sign DP, you abolish those defilements, all defilements, maybe thousands of defilements. In Attasalini describes thousands of defilements. You have to abolish when practicing this magga to enter Nibbana. So those every defile, the thousands of defilements have been synthesized in 10 fetters. They are called Dasa Sanyodana Dhamma, 10 fetters. 10 fetters means those are the defilements that the person tightened to the world, to the sansara. Because of that 10 fetters, people, the being, he dies and again he has rebirth and again he dies and again he has rebirth. He goes on in this circle of birth. That is because of that 10 fetters. 10 fetters includes thousands of defilements. In Arthasalini, the commentary for Dhammasangani, it describes when person enter into Sovan, when the person enters into Sovan, he abolished forever the thousands of defilements. In that way, when you enter into Sakuddhagan, Anagan, Arihat, gradually, step by step, you abolish those defilements. So all defilements have been synthesized in these 10 fetters. By practicing eightfold pathway in deep sense, as inside meditation, the person abolishes in 4 stages these 10 fetters and he is released. He is transcends this world. He transcends these 5 aggregates. Loka, the world is itself these 5 aggregates. So he transcends these 5 aggregates and he is no more in the circle of birth. When a person enters into Sovan, Magga and Phala, there arise Sovan consciousness in his mind, wholesome consciousness. So when he enters into the Sovan state, or when he arises, this consciousness, the first supramundane consciousness, and then he abolish 3 fetters. Out of these 10 fetters, he abolished forever 3 fetters: Sakkaya Ditti, Vicikicca, Silabbata, Paramas. Sakkaya Ditti means it has broad meaning. That is, in short, we can say egoism. Avoid egoism. That is, design my personal beliefs. Sakkaya Ditti. He abolished it. Because of that Sakkaya Ditti, the people tend to engage in so many unwholesome activities. They perform unwholesome activities, so they gather unwholesome results to be in the circle of birth. He first abolished this Sakkaya Ditti. And Vicikicca, that is doubt or skepticism about Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. If the person has doubts in Buddha or Dhamma or Sangha, he can't follow that magga. He can't go in that magga. So he have to avoid those doubts. So when the person enters into the Sohan state, he abolishes all doubts. He abolishes those delusions, and he understands the truth, the real things he understands. So he abolished or settled his doubts with Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and the former birth. He suspects whether I had a former birth and the rebirth. He suspects. Some people believe that they don't believe in rebirth. After that, there is no more there. Nothing happens, no more there. It's called Uchchedavada, nihilism, Uchchedavada. So some persons, they don't believe in rebirth, and both former birth and rebirth. And Tisiksha, they suspect the Tisiksha also, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Is this the way towards Nibbana? Can we attain Nibbana by following this Tisiksha? In that way, they suspect. So you have to abolish those doubts. Then, Paticca Samuppada Kankati, that is dependent origination. Some people, they don't believe in dependent originations. They believe in creation. So we have to abolish all those doubts. Sakkaya Ditti, Vicikicca. And then the Silabbata Paramas. Silabbata Paramas means engaging in rituals, engaging in sacrifices. That is following the wrong way towards the salvation or the Nibbana. You have to avoid those wrong rituals, wrong practices. You have to get rid of those wrong practices. Sakkaya Ditti, Vichikitta, Silabbata, Paramas. That's why when the person enter into the Sovan state called enter into the stream. Now he he is in the gateway. He is on the gateway towards Nibbana. He does not go other way around. He definitely follow this magga as a tide, as a stream. He follow this. That is called the enter into the stream. So on. Then the second state, Sakuddhagama. Vitakka Vichara Piti Sukhe Kalpata Sakadagami Magga Chitta and Pala Chitta in that way. When what this consciousness is there, right? In Sakadagami state, the being abolished two fetters called Kamaraga Patiga in halfway round, not completely. In halfway round, he abolished Kamaraga Patiga. Kamaraga means sensuous desire is Kamaraga. Patiga is aversion, anger, aversion, patiga. It's abolished in halfway round. Now you can understand when person enter into Sovan state, he has this sensuous desire, Kamaraga. You know, Visakha, she entered into Sovan state at the age of 7. Then she led the marriage life also. Sovan is after entering the Sovan state. So when person enters Sovan state, there is those sensuous desire, kamara. And patiga is the aversion, patiga, anger, vyapada. It abolished in halfway round. Now you can understand when the person come to that third stage, Sakuddhagami, he abolished these kamaraga and patiga, sensuous desire and aversion completely, forever, never arise again. And he tries to abolish those another 5 fetters, Ruparaga, Aruparaga, Mana, Uddhata, Avidya. But he can't abolish those fetters. He tries up to some extent by practicing insight meditation. Kamaraga means to be born, having desire to be born in fine material sphere. That is Kamaraga. Sorry, Ruparaga. Ruparaga. Aruparaga. When the person has desire to be born in immaterial Brahmaloka, that is Aruparaga. So when the persons enter into the Sakudagayami stage, he abolishes. He abolishes those two fetters. He abolishes these Kamaraga and Patiga forever. And Ruparaga, Aruparaga, Mana, Uddata, Avidya, those five. He tries to suppress or try to abolish those five fetters. But when in Anagami state, when he comes to the Anagami stage, he abolished those two fetters, Kamaraga and Patika completely, and he tries to suppress these five fetters, Ruparaga, Aruparaga, Mana, Uddata, Avidya. After entering Arahant, he abolished those five fetters completely and become Arahant. So if he arrives Arahant consciousness and Arahant Phala consciousness, so he can enter into Nibbana. To enter Nibbana, before to enter Nibbana, he develops 7 enlightenment factors, Sapta Bodhanga Dhamma. In that way, the being, he enter into Nibbana by abolishing those 10 fetters. That is the functions of the supramundane consciousness. This supramundane consciousness destroy death and birth. In Atthasani, there are so many examples given in the stories. They are fairly long, so I have no time to explain them. In short, I can say, when a person is building a wall, he takes some bricks or something and he using mixed cement and he building a wall. Suppose he is building a wall. Then another person is come and he take heavy logs and he destroy this building, this wall. So one person is building the wall gradually, the other person is destroy at the same time. In that way, the consciousness, sense sphere consciousness, 54, fine material consciousness, 15, immaterial consciousness, 12. Altogether, what do they do? They form death and rebirth. So this they do the person who built the wall. The person who built the wall, in that way, those consciousness create or build uh, death and birth. Death and birth. And there's another person, he is to destroy at the same time. At once he destroys. The person, one person is building, at once other person comes and is destroyed. So these supramundane consciousness are like that man who destroyed this uh, building wall. That is one example given in Athasalini. There are so many examples. One example is there about the 4 boxes in the dark room. A person comes and he opened the door, and the boxes are in dark. So he light a lamp and destroy darkness, and he do the tasks that he want with the 4 boxes. Then he comes in that way 4 times. In the 4th time he comes, he enter into the room and he sees the boxes, but he can't see the boxes because they are in dark. Then he thinks, what I have to do, I want to light a lamp. Before to light lamp, the sun arises, their sunlights come at once. In that way, this Sovan, Sakurdagami, Anagami, Arihat, in 4 stages, entering into Arahant is just like having the sun rays, sunlights. In that way, and abolishing darkness, that is, abolishing these 10 fetters. 10 fetters in the mind. In that way, so many examples are there in Atthasavali. If you want to know, you have to read those stories in Atthasavali. I think the time is up now. Let me stop my lesson with this. Thank you very much listening to me. Blessing of the triple gems be showered upon you.
Much merit to you, our esteemed, most Venerable Bulwala Ratana Siritero. Dhamma listeners, if you have any questions that you wish to ask from our Reverend teacher, you may wish to do so. You can unmute your microphone and speak, or you can send the question on chat, or you can send the question on the Google form. We have no questions on our Google form, and I don't see any questions on the YouTube live stream channel. If our Zoom listeners have any questions, you are welcome to do so before we wrap up our class. In that case, we will conclude our sixth Abhidhamma class in English, and we will return again next week, Saturday, same time, continuing the lesson on, and I think it will be a new topic on the four ultimate realities. Until then, I wish all of our listeners very happy New Year, and stay safe, stay well. Much merit to you, Reverend Sir, and merit to all our listeners. I will end now.
I would like to invoke merit to you for conducting this class in the fine way. Thank you very much.
Sadhu, sadhu.